She was forced to wed a dying millionaire in her sister's place. That night, she learned the truth. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The church bells tolled in the distance, echoing across the valley like a warning. Anna Carter stood at the edge of the grand marble steps, her hands trembling as her mother tightened the veil over her hair. Her sister had disappeared the night before, running away from an arranged marriage that promised wealth but none of the love she longed for. The family had been thrown into chaos, and in the dark hours before dawn, Anna's father had made the choice for her. "You will take her place," he said sternly, his voice edged with desperation. "If you do not, we will lose everything. The debt collectors are circling, and this marriage is the only way to keep a roof over our heads." Anna's heart pounded in her chest. She was 21, with dreams of finishing school and perhaps one day working in a bookstore. Instead, she was being ushered into a role she never asked for, a marriage to a man she had never truly met. Whispers traveled through town that the groom, Adrian Blackwood, was a dying millionaire. His health was failing, and rumors claimed he had only months to live. As she was led inside the candlelit church, Anna's thoughts spun like leaves in a storm. The pews were filled with people she did not know, men and women in tailored suits and jeweled gowns, their eyes sharp and judgmental. They turned their heads as she passed, whispering, "That is not the sister. That is the younger one." They are desperate, throwing her to him instead. The music swelled from the organ, grand and heavy, and at the end of the aisle stood Adrian. Tall, broad-shouldered, but pale beneath the soft glow of the stained glass windows. His face was striking, with chiseled features and dark eyes that seemed to see too much. But his posture was stiff, his movements measured, as though illness pulled at him with invisible chains. Anna's steps faltered. Every instinct told her to turn and run, but her mother's hand pressed firmly at her back. "Do this for us," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please, Anna." The ceremony passed in a haze. The priest spoke words of union, of vows, of sacred promises. But to Anna, it felt like she was reading lines in a play she never auditioned for. When the time came to exchange rings, her fingers shook so badly that Adrian had to steady her hand. His skin was cool against hers, his touch brief, but in that moment she caught a flicker in his eyes, not weakness, not frailty, but something unreadable, almost calculating. "You may kiss the bride," the priest declared. Adrian did not move to kiss her lips. Instead, he pressed a formal kiss against her gloved hand, his expression unreadable to the crowd. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the room, but the priest continued, sealing their union with a solemn nod. When they walked back down the aisle together, Anna's mind was spinning. She was now Mrs. Blackwood, wife to a man rumored to be dying, bound by vows she never chose to speak. Outside the church, the flash of cameras blinded her as reporters shouted questions. Is it true he is leaving her everything? How long will it last? Does she even know him? The limousine door closed, muffling the chaos. Inside, the silence was deafening. Adrian sat across from her, his eyes fixed on the window, his posture regal yet detached. Anna clutched the bouquet in her lap, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why me?" His gaze turned to her then, sharp and unyielding. "Because your family offered you. And because I agreed." The words chilled her. The man beside her was supposed to be dying, yet his tone was not frail or weak. It was firm, commanding, and full of secrets. As the car rolled toward the sprawling Blackwood estate, Anna realized one truth that struck her harder than any vow. She had not just married a dying millionaire. She had married into a mystery far darker, far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. The limousine carried Anna Carter through winding country roads, past iron gates and manicured gardens, until at last it stopped in front of the Blackwood estate. The mansion loomed in the twilight, its stone walls lit by flickering lanterns, its windows glowing like watchful eyes. Anna's breath caught in her throat as the driver opened her door. She stepped out onto the gravel drive, her wedding gown brushing against the stones, and looked up at the house that would now be her home. Her new husband, Adrian Blackwood, exited with a deliberate grace. Though rumors whispered he was on the edge of death, there was strength in the way he carried himself. His back straight, his stride measured. Yet his skin was pale, his movements slower than one might expect of a man his age, as if he carried a hidden weight. Inside, the grand foyer stretched upward with marble floors and sweeping staircases. Chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting light across portraits of Blackwood ancestors, stern-faced men and elegant women who seemed to watch Anna as she passed. A staff of servants lined the hall, their eyes sharp, their expressions unreadable. Some dipped their heads politely. Others let their gazes linger with thinly veiled disdain. Anna felt her stomach tighten. She was not wanted here. She was an imposter, a replacement bride pushed into a role she did not choose. That evening, dinner was laid in a dining hall so vast she could barely see the other end of the table. Adrian sat opposite her, the distance between them as wide as an ocean. A butler poured wine into crystal glasses, and plates of fine cuisine were set before them, but Anna could hardly eat. The silence pressed heavy on her chest until she finally found her voice. "Why would you agree to this marriage?" she asked softly. "If you are so close to—" She hesitated, unable to speak the word aloud. Adrian's dark eyes lifted to hers, unflinching. "Dying?" He finished for her, his voice calm, almost amused. "Because appearances must be maintained. Because power requires a wife, even if she does not come willingly. And because your family gave me no reason to refuse." Anna's hand tightened around her fork. "So I am nothing more than a pawn in your game." His lips curved faintly, though it was not a smile. "We are both pawns, Anna. Do not forget that." The rest of the meal passed in silence. Later, in her assigned bedroom, Anna removed her veil and gown, staring at her reflection in the tall mirror. The woman looking back at her seemed like a stranger, dressed in silk and jewels that did not belong to her. She thought of her mother's tired eyes, her father's commanding voice, the debts that had piled higher with every passing month. This marriage, as cruel as it felt, was the only thing keeping her family from ruin. Her chest tightened with both anger and sorrow. She had sacrificed her freedom, her dignity, perhaps even her happiness, for people who saw her only as a solution. The following days were no easier. She was paraded before guests, introduced to business associates, trained in etiquette she had never cared to learn. Every step she took seemed judged, every word she spoke scrutinized. The whispers followed her everywhere. "She is not the sister we were promised. She must have married him for money." A desperate girl for a dying man. Anna tried to hold her head high, but at night, when she was alone, the weight of it all pressed down like a stone. She felt the sting of humiliation, the ache of loneliness, and the creeping suspicion that there was more to Adrian Blackwood than anyone let on. He was supposed to be frail, on the brink of death. Yet his presence was steady, his eyes sharp, his words deliberate. She remembered the moment in the church when his hand steadied hers as she slid the ring onto his finger. His skin had been cool, but his gaze had not been weak. It had been calculating, watchful, as though he was measuring her worth. Lying in bed, Anna whispered into the darkness, "What have I walked into?" Her voice trembled, but deep down she knew the answer. She had walked into a bargain that bound her future to a man shrouded in mystery, a man who might not be dying at all. Morning light streamed through the tall windows of the Blackwood estate, casting golden stripes across the marble floors. Anna Carter stood in the vast foyer with her hands folded tightly in front of her. A maid approached, carrying a silver tray, and set down a folder thick with documents. "Mrs. Blackwood," she said formally, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt at the title. "Mr. Blackwood asks that you review these rules." Anna opened the folder, her pulse quickening as her eyes scanned the pages. There were 5 terms, written in clean, precise script, as if carved in stone. The first, no expectation of intimacy. The second, attendance at social and corporate events was mandatory. The third, no interference in personal business matters. The fourth, absolute confidentiality regarding all affairs of the household. The fifth, this arrangement would remain fixed until further notice. Her throat tightened as she closed the folder. It was not a marriage, it was a contract. The whispers in the church, the sideways glances at dinner, all of them had been right. She was here not as a wife, but as a role to be played. Later that evening, she was summoned to Adrian's study. The room smelled faintly of leather and old paper. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with volumes of law, finance, and philosophy. Adrian sat behind a mahogany desk, his fingers steepled together, his dark eyes fixed on her. "You have read the terms," he said calmly. Anna nodded, though her jaw clenched. "Yes. And I cannot help but notice there is no mention of choice." His lips curved faintly, a shadow of amusement. "Choice is a luxury. You and I both know you did not come here out of love. You came here because your family demanded it. I offered them stability, and they gave me a bride." Her voice rose, trembling with anger. "So, I am a transaction, a placeholder for your image, a pawn to polish your reputation." Adrian leaned forward, his gaze sharp. "And what did you expect, Anna? A fairy tale? You came into this house knowing I am a dying man. Did you truly imagine romance?" The words sliced through her like a blade, yet something in his tone unsettled her. His voice was not frail, his eyes were not weak. He spoke not like a man on the brink of death, but like one in complete control. That night, Anna sat at her dressing table, staring at the contract once more. Her reflection in the mirror was pale, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion. She whispered to herself, "This is not love. This is survival." She thought of her mother's medicine, of her father's debts, of her sister who had run from this fate. She could not run. She had to endure. In the following days, her training began. A stern instructor named Mrs. Linton arrived to guide her in the art of etiquette. Anna was taught how to walk across marble without tripping, how to hold a champagne glass without smudging it, how to smile politely, even when insulted. Again, Mrs. Linton barked as Anna stumbled over the correct use of cutlery. "You are no longer a shop girl. You are Mrs. Blackwood. Learn it or be humiliated." Anna's cheeks burned, but she forced herself to repeat the motions. Fork in the left hand, knife in the right, posture straight. The lessons were grueling, but she bit her tongue and endured, because failure was not an option. At night, however, when the corridors of the mansion grew quiet, the weight of loneliness pressed down on her. She walked past gilded portraits and wondered how many of the women in those frames had lived lives bound by duty instead of desire. She longed for freedom, for the simplicity of her old life, for the laughter she had once shared with her sister before everything had changed. But every time despair threatened to overwhelm her, Anna reminded herself of the stakes. She had taken this burden to save her family. If she could survive the coldness of Adrian Blackwood and the cruelty of his world, then her sacrifice would not be in vain. One evening, as she practiced curtsying in the grand hall, she caught Adrian watching her from the staircase. His expression was unreadable, a mixture of detachment and something else she could not name. She straightened quickly, her cheeks flushed. He spoke at last, his tone even. "You are learning. That is good. But remember, Anna, appearances are everything in this house. If you falter, they will devour you." His words lingered in her ears long after he turned away. Appearances were everything, and she had no choice but to perfect hers, even if inside, she felt as though she was crumbling. The night of the charity dinner arrived with a tension Anna Carter could feel in her bones. After days of grueling lessons, endless fittings, and constant corrections, she was now to be unveiled before the world as Mrs. Adrian Blackwood. The staff fluttered around her, adjusting the hem of her gown, fastening the clasp of a necklace that gleamed under the light, and smoothing the veil of hair styled into an elegant knot. Her reflection in the mirror looked regal, but she hardly recognized herself. Beneath the diamonds and silk was the same young woman who had once swept floors in a corner bookstore, who had dreamed of freedom rather than ballrooms. She took a deep breath and whispered under her breath, "You must survive this, Anna. For them. For your family." Adrian entered the room as the final touches were finished. He wore a black tuxedo, tailored to perfection, his dark hair combed neatly, his face calm and unreadable. He looked every inch the powerful millionaire whose name commanded boardrooms. Yet there was a stillness in his movements, a calculated slowness that reminded her of the rumors. To the world, he was fragile, a man nearing his end. To Anna, he was something far more complicated. "You will walk beside me," he instructed, his voice smooth and unwavering. "Smile when I speak to you. Do not answer questions you are not asked. Tonight is not about you. Tonight is about appearances." Her fists clenched at her sides, but she nodded. The ballroom was a blaze of chandeliers, velvet drapes, and golden light. The moment they stepped inside, every eye turned. Murmurs swept through the crowd like a rising tide. "That is not the older sister. Who is she? So young, so ordinary. A replacement bride for a dying man." Anna's cheeks flushed, but she remembered Adrian's warning. She kept her head high, her arm linked with his as they descended the staircase together. Throughout the evening, she was introduced to investors, relatives, and so-called friends of the Blackwood family. Their smiles were thin, their words edged with mockery. One woman leaned closer, her perfume cloying, and whispered, "Do not get too comfortable, dear. He will not be here long. And then, where will you be?" Anna forced a polite smile, but inside her stomach twisted. At dinner, she sat at Adrian's side as crystal glasses clinked and silverware gleamed. The conversations swirled around her, sharp with politics and finance she could not follow. She focused on keeping her posture straight, her hands steady. But then it happened. An investor, red-faced from wine, leaned forward with a smirk. "Tell me, Mrs. Blackwood, do you even know which fork to use for the first course? Or did they skip that part of your training?" Laughter rippled around the table. Anna froze, heat rushing to her cheeks. She glanced at Adrian, but his face was unreadable, as if waiting to see how she would handle it. Her hands trembled as she picked up a fork. For a moment, she faltered, nearly reaching for the wrong one. Then she remembered Mrs. Linton's stern voice drilling into her mind. "Fork in the left, knife in the right, always." She lifted the correct fork, tapped it gently against her plate, and smiled faintly. "This one," she said softly, her voice clear. "But I have also learned that what matters more than cutlery is the company you keep at the table." The laughter died abruptly. A hush fell across the group, and then, surprisingly, someone chuckled. The tension broke. The investor's smirk faltered, replaced with a stiff nod. Adrian's gaze lingered on Anna then, a flicker of something unreadable in his dark eyes. Approval, perhaps, or curiosity. Whatever it was the first time he looked at her as more than just a pawn. The evening carried on, but the balance had shifted. Anna had proven herself capable of surviving their ridicule, of holding her own in a world designed to crush her. Later, as they rode back to the estate in silence, Adrian finally spoke. His tone was low, measured. "You handled yourself better than expected." Anna looked out the window at the passing city lights, her chest still tight with nerves. "I am not here to be humiliated, Mr. Blackwood. I may not belong in your world, but I will not let them destroy me." For the briefest moment, his lips curved into something close to a smile. Then it vanished, replaced with his usual mask. But in that fleeting expression, Anna saw the smallest crack in his armor, and it gave her a spark of strength she had not felt since the day she was forced into this marriage. That night, as she lay awake in the vast, cold room of the mansion, she realized the truth. She was no longer just surviving. She was beginning to fight back, even if she did not yet know the cost. The morning after the gala, Anna Carter awoke with a strange heaviness in her chest. She replayed the evening over and over in her mind, the laughter that had cut through her like a blade, the heat of humiliation, and then the moment she had managed to turn it back on them. She remembered Adrian's eyes, sharp and watchful, as though he had been testing her. She descended the marble staircase into the dining room where Adrian sat at the far end of the long table, a newspaper unfolded in his hands. Without looking up, he spoke in a measured tone. "You made the papers." "Oh." Her steps faltered. "What do you mean?" He folded the paper and slid it across the polished surface. On the front page was a photograph of her at the gala, her chin lifted, a faint smile on her lips. The headline read, "The Blackwood Bride Holds Her Own." Anna stared at it, stunned. The article beneath described her as unrefined but spirited, a girl out of her depth but unwilling to drown. It was not cruel, but it was far from kind. Adrian's voice broke the silence. "You survived." That was the first test. Her eyes lifted to his. Is that what this is to you? A series of tests? He leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. It is not about me, Anna. It is about them. The people who would tear us apart at the first sign of weakness. They watch everything. They feed on mistakes. You showed them you are not as fragile as they assumed. Anna's fists clenched in her lap. I did not come here to play games. I came here because I had no choice. Oh. Adrian's eyes flickered, something cold and distant in them. Choice is an illusion. You will learn that soon enough. The following days were relentless. She was dragged from one lesson to another, rehearsing introductions, practicing dances, and studying the names and faces of powerful men and women she would be forced to greet. The staff corrected her every mistake with clipped tones and disapproving glares. Every evening, she collapsed onto her bed, her body aching, her mind spinning with exhaustion. Yet despite the grueling routine, Anna noticed something shifting within herself. She was beginning to adapt. She learned how to hold her glass without trembling, how to walk into a room without shrinking, how to meet the cutting stares of wealthy socialites without letting them see her fear. Slowly, her backbone straightened. Slowly, she began to believe she could stand in this gilded world, even if she did not belong to it. But her relationship with Adrian remained a battlefield of silence. They spoke only when necessary, their conversations clipped, their interactions formal. He was always watching, always calculating, and Anna could not tell if he was her protector or her jailer. One evening, as she stood on the balcony overlooking the gardens, she heard his footsteps behind her. You did well again today, he said simply. Anna did not turn. You speak of me as though I am one of your business acquisitions, another investment to manage. For the first time, his tone softened. You are more than that. But you do not yet understand what it means to be in my world. She turned to face him, her eyes burning. Then explain it to me. Do not hide behind contracts and rules. Do not hide behind this illusion of frailty. You are not as close to death as everyone believes, are you? For a heartbeat, silence hung between them. His eyes locked on hers, dark and intense, and she felt her pulse quicken. But then he turned away, his mask sliding back into place. Go inside, Anna, he said quietly. It is late. Frustration surged through her. He had dodged her question, leaving her with more doubts than before. She returned to her room with her chest tight, her mind racing. That night, as thunder rolled across the sky, Anna lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She had survived another test, endured another round of ridicule, and grown stronger in the process. But she could not shake the feeling that she was being pulled deeper into a game she did not yet understand. And beneath it all, one truth pressed against her heart. Adrian Blackwood was not the man the world believed him to be. He was hiding something that could either destroy her or change everything. The storm outside the Blackwood estate raged late into the night, but inside, the mansion was silent. Anna Carter lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying the same questions over and over. Adrian Blackwood was supposed to be dying, yet his every word, his every look, carried the authority of a man who still held complete control. The whispers in town painted him as frail, but Anna had begun to see something else. A man hiding behind the image of weakness, a man who was deliberately keeping his true strength concealed. The following morning, she joined him in the grand dining room. The long table was set with silver and crystal, but only 2 places were prepared. Adrian sat at the far end, his face calm, his movements deliberate as he stirred his tea. You are quiet, he observed, his dark eyes lifting to meet hers. Anna swallowed the lump in her throat. Why do you pretend to be something you are not? Everyone believes you are close to death. But I see you. You are not as weak as they think. Why keep up the lie? For a moment, his gaze hardened, and she feared he would dismiss her outright. But then he leaned back in his chair, his voice low and deliberate. Perception is power. Let them think I am frail. Let them underestimate me. It allows me to control the game without them ever realizing I am the one moving the pieces. Her chest tightened. And what am I in this game? Another piece to move? He studied her for a long moment before answering. You are the one piece no one accounted for. That makes you dangerous. The words left her shaken. She wanted to argue, to push him further, but his expression made it clear the conversation was over. Later that day, the household prepared for another gathering. Adrian's business partners were expected, men who held sway over his empire, and who would surely scrutinize the new Mrs. Blackwood. Anna dressed in another borrowed gown, her hair styled by attendants, her face painted with care. Each layer of silk and jewelry felt like armor, and yet she still felt exposed. At the gathering, Adrian played his part well. He moved slowly, his hand resting on a cane, his breaths measured, as though illness weighed heavily on him. To the crowd, he was the image of fragility. But Anna, watching closely, saw the truth in the sharpness of his eyes, in the way his hand gripped hers when they greeted guests, steady and firm, not weak. The whispers began again, swirling around the edges of the room. She is so young. A replacement bride. She will not last in this world. Anna felt the sting of every word, but she kept her chin high, remembering what Adrian had told her. Appearances are everything. Midway through the evening, an incident broke the carefully crafted image. A guest spilled a drink dangerously close to the documents laid on a side table. Without hesitation, Adrian moved with speed and strength that no dying man could have mustered. He caught the glass, before it shattered, his grip firm, his body steady. For a fleeting second, the mask slipped. The room fell into silence, eyes narrowing as guests exchanged looks. Adrian quickly resumed his role, feigning a cough, leaning heavily on his cane as if the effort had drained him. But Anna had seen enough, and from the look on a few faces in the crowd, so had they. That night, back at the estate, Anna confronted him once more. "You are lying to them," she said, her voice trembling with both fear and anger. "You let them believe you are dying, but you are not. Why?" Adrian's expression was unreadable as he poured himself a glass of wine. "Because lies can be stronger than truth. Because if they knew I still held my strength, they would strike faster, harder. My enemies wait like wolves at the edge of the forest. A dying man is not worth hunting, but a strong one, he is prey they will not ignore." Her hands curled into fists. "And me? What am I supposed to do with this truth you are forcing me to carry? Pretend beside you? Smile while I drown in a marriage built on deception?" His gaze met hers, steady and unwavering. "You can choose to see it as a prison, or you can see it as a shield. Standing beside me means you share in the protection of my name, even if you do not yet understand the cost." Anna turned away, her chest heaving. His words were meant to reassure, but they only deepened the storm inside her. She had married a man everyone believed was dying, but now, in the silence of the grand hall, she realized the truth. Adrian Blackwood was not dying at all. He was very much alive, very much powerful, and his secret had now become hers to bear. For the first time since stepping into this mansion, Anna no longer feared his weakness. She feared his strength. The days following Adrian Blackwood's slip at the gathering were filled with whispers that spread faster than fire. Servants carried gossip from room to room, and business partners began making subtle inquiries. Some had seen the steadiness of his hands, the quickness of his movements, and they began to wonder if the tale of his impending death was nothing more than a carefully woven lie. Anna Carter felt the tension in every corner of the estate. The air seemed thicker, every glance sharper. She had become both an outsider and a target. The newspapers questioned her presence, labeling her the replacement bride, suggesting she had manipulated her way into the marriage to secure an inheritance. At dinner one evening, Adrian's cousin, Richard Hale, arrived unannounced. He was a broad man with a voice that carried arrogance like a crown. Sitting at the table, he looked across at Anna and sneered. "Tell me, Mrs. Blackwood, how does it feel to know the world calls you a fortune hunter? Do you sleep well in a bed you did not earn?" Anna's face flushed hot, but before she could speak, Adrian raised his hand. His voice was calm, but the steel beneath it was unmistakable. "Careful, Richard. You are in my house." Richard smirked. "Your house, yes. But how long before it belongs to her, or to those who would take it once you are gone?" The words sliced through the air. Anna felt them like a blade, not only because of the insult but because of the truth hidden inside them. Adrian's mask of weakness was crumbling, and his enemies were circling closer. That night, Anna sat alone in her room, staring at the rain-streaked window. She thought of her mother's failing health, her father's debts, and the sister who had abandoned her to this fate. She had taken this marriage to protect her family, But now she realized she was entangled in a war far larger than herself. Her heart twisted with doubt. Was she strong enough to endure the lies, the ridicule, the endless scrutiny? Was she strong enough to face a man whose truth was more dangerous than his deception? As thunder rolled outside, Anna whispered into the darkness, "What have I become?" And in the silence that followed, she realized she was no longer only a pawn in Adrian Blackwood's game. She was now a piece in a battle for power, one that could either break her or forge her into something unshakable. The family council was called on a gray afternoon when the sky hung low with clouds, as if nature itself mirrored the tension inside the Blackwood estate. Anna Carter entered the marble hall at Adrian's side, her pulse hammering in her ears. Long tables stretched across the room, filled with relatives, shareholders, and lawyers, every face turned toward them with suspicion. Richard Hale stood at the center, his voice loud and mocking. "This marriage is a sham," he declared, slamming a folder of papers onto the table. "Here lies proof that Adrian Blackwood is not as ill as he has led us to believe. And here, evidence of Anna Carter's family debts. She is no wife. She is a parasite, a girl bought and placed here to feed on our legacy." The words struck Anna like blows. She wanted to defend herself, but her throat locked with shame. The faces around her hardened, eyes gleaming with contempt. Whispers filled the room. "A fortune hunter. A fraud." Adrian rose slowly from his chair. For a moment, he let them believe the act of standing was difficult, but when he straightened, his voice rang out strong and steady, silencing the crowd. "Enough." He took the folder Richard had thrown down, tore it in two, and let the pieces fall to the marble floor. The sound of paper ripping echoed like thunder. "This marriage began as a contract," Adrian said, his gaze sweeping across the room. "But it will not end as one. Anna is my wife by choice, and from this day forward, she stands not as a pawn, but as my equal. If you question her worth, then you question mine, and I will not tolerate it." Gasps rippled through the chamber. Richard's smirk faltered, replaced with fury. Anna stared at Adrian, her chest tight with emotion. For the first time since their union began, he had chosen to fight for her openly. In that moment, the contract that bound them was gone, replaced by something far more fragile and far more powerful. The days following the council meeting were strangely quiet in the Blackwood estate. The echoes of Adrian's declaration still lingered in the halls, his voice carrying strength that none could deny. For Anna Carter, the silence was both heavy and liberating. She had walked into that chamber as a pawn, but she had walked out as something more, his wife, not by contract, but by choice. One evening, Adrian invited her to the garden, where the last of the summer roses bloomed under lantern light. He stood waiting by the fountain, no longer leaning on his cane, no longer playing the part of a dying man. His posture was strong, his eyes steady, and for the first time, Anna saw him without the veil of deception. "I owe you the truth," he said quietly. "When this began, I let the world believe I was dying because it gave me control. But in protecting myself, I placed you in a cage you never asked for. You endured humiliation, suspicion, and the cruelty of my world, and yet you did not break." He stepped closer, his voice softening. "You deserve more than a bargain, Anna. You deserve a choice." Her heart thudded in her chest as he opened a small velvet box. Inside rested a simple gold band, far humbler than the jeweled ring she had worn at their wedding. He held it out to her with steady hands. "This time, no contracts, no conditions, no lies. I am asking you not as Adrian Blackwood, the millionaire, but as a man who has come to love you. Will you choose me, freely?" Tears blurred Anna's vision as she stared at the ring. She thought of the girl she had been when she first walked down that church aisle, frightened, unwilling, carrying the weight of her family's debts. And she thought of who she had become, stronger, braver, unafraid to meet the eyes of those who once scorned her. With trembling hands, she took the ring and whispered, "Yes." Adrian slipped it onto her finger, and for the first time, kissed her not with formality, but with tenderness. The fountain gurgled softly behind them, the roses swayed in the evening breeze, and the night seemed to seal their vow. Weeks later, they held a small ceremony in the garden, attended only by a handful of trusted friends. There were no reporters, no flashing cameras, no contracts. Just two souls standing side by side, speaking words not of duty but of love. As Adrian whispered, You were never a replacement. You were always the one. Anna smiled through tears, knowing the truth at last. What had begun as a forced union, born of lies and survival, had transformed into something neither of them expected. Not wealth, not power, but love real, undeniable, and theirs to keep.